Hi, hello everybody. So, good morning all, and thank you for joining us. I am happy to see such a large audience here. My name is Maciej Józefowicz, and I represent Datapolis marketing team. This is the first of our guest expert webinars, to which we invited SharePoint MVPs and community leaders to discuss with them various issues in our area of expertise, in the things that Datapolis does. That means workflow design and process management in Microsoft SharePoint. With me today on this first webinar is Bjoern Rapp from Norway, SharePoint MVP and one of leaders of Norwegian SharePoint community. He will talk about limitations of SharePoint Designer, about things what it can do, and about things where you need to use some other tools to deploy workflows and manage processes. The presentation should take about 45 minutes, then there will be some time for questions and answers, and in the end I will show you some more capabilities of Datapolis, including Datapolis Process System online test sites. So I think we should do it all in about 1 hour, maybe a bit more. Okay, so I think we are all set. Bjoern, you can start.
Thank you, Maciej.
Thank you.
Are you hearing me well?
Yep.
Yeah. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to this webinar that I'm running in cooperation with Datapolis. The title Limitations of SharePoint Designer is not 100% accurate, as in the sense that it's also talking about SharePoint workflow capabilities of SharePoint Designer and not the product as a whole. We must not forget that SharePoint Designer is a highly useful tool for several advanced non-coding cases. So in this webinar, limitations of SharePoint Designer really means limitations of workflows in SharePoint Designer. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Bjoern Rapp, and I work as a senior advisor for the multinational consulting company Steria since January this year. I have a diverse programming background with experience both as a developer, an architect, and project managers on a wide variety of solutions. For the last 6 years, I've been focusing more or less 100% on SharePoint solutions. I'm also, as Maciej said, I'm an active member of the SharePoint community, attending and speaking at events both in my native Norway and elsewhere around the world when I get the opportunity. I'm a SharePoint MVP, and I also occasionally teach classes in SharePoint and SQL Server, and also in programming matters. I'm focusing mostly on business processes, including analytics like BI, reporting, and workflows. And you can follow me from the Twitter handle shown here in the bottom left, and you can also visit me at my blog at www.sharepointviking.com. So these are the topics I will try to cover here in today. I will not go into any very deep technical details, as the time does not permit for that, but I will focus on describing the SharePoint Designer workflow capabilities at a high and understandable level. Then I will put attention to functionalities where I feel SharePoint Designer is lagging a bit, especially when we are discussing workflows. And finally, I will introduce the Datapolis process system, which is a fully fledged and easy to use workflow solutions that you might have about taking a look at as a potential alternative to using SharePoint Designer for your workflows. So when discussing workflows in SharePoint 2013, it will be beneficial to first get an overview of the architecture, as the workflow model has changed considerably in 2013 compared to its predecessor SharePoint Server 2010. SharePoint 2013 introduces a new workflow engine based on Windows Workflow Foundation 4, which is located outside of the SharePoint farm. Thus freeing up resources for other core SharePoint processes in the farm. So in this architecture, Workflow Manager provides the management of workflow definitions, as you can see on the right. It also hosts the execution processes for workflow instances. So in clear word, that means that workflows are running outside of the SharePoint farm. SharePoint itself provides the framework for SharePoint workflows, additionally associations, activities, and other metadata, and they are stored and managed in SharePoint 2013. And you can also see, as for backwards compatibility, the SharePoint 2013 also contains a SharePoint 2010 workflow hosts, providing a runtime environment for workflows ported from SharePoint 2010. In fact, SharePoint 2010 Workflows is the default workflow engine, as the SharePoint 2013 workflow engine is a separate install. SharePoint Designer 2013 is the primary business user tool for creating workflow definitions and publishing them like it has been for previous versions since SharePoint 2007. So when you open your SharePoint Designer 2013, this will probably be the first page you see. So with SharePoint Designer 2013, you can design no-code workflow solutions that manage simple to more complex business processes in your organization. A workflow can add logic to both system and human processes. So for a system process, a workflow can, for example, update one data source when another one is being changed, whereas a human process workflow might send a document, such as an expense report, to a manager for approval. And if approved, it will continue to the accounting department for processing. As marked in the ribbon on the top there, in SharePoint Designer 2013, there are 3 types of workflows. So to the left, we have the list workflow, which has been available since SharePoint 2007. Because it has the context of the list for which it was created, list workflows have automatic access to the values of the custom fields for the list item. List workflows cannot be made available to other lists or libraries. Next one is the reusable list workflows. You can create them in the top-level site of a site collection, and that workflow can be made globally reusable, meaning that it can be associated to any list, any library, or content type in the site collection. Unlike the list workflow, a reusable workflow does not belong to any specific list or library. Therefore, they only provide by default the columns that are common across all lists and libraries, such as created by, created, or modified by. The last one is the site workflow, and a site workflow is associated to a site and not to a list. So unlike most workflows, a site workflow is not running on a specific list item. When you want to create, for example, a list workflow in SharePoint Designer, you start by pressing the list workflow button that you saw there on the ribbon. And then you will see a dialog where you can select the available list of libraries for the current site. And when that is done, you will see the create list workflow that you can see here on the screen. They will specify the name of the workflow. You can have an optional description. And the most important, you can specify the workflow engine, whether it's a SharePoint 2010 or 2013 workflow engine. But unless you have not installed the Workflow Manager and registered it in SharePoint, you will always see the SharePoint 2010 workflow. But with the Workflow Manager installed, you will have the SharePoint 2013 workflow available, and you should always use that when creating new workflows in SharePoint 2013. A workflow consists of different kinds of building blocks named actions and conditions. And a workflow also has several other steps used for the design phase called steps and stages, and each of them consists of actions and any associated conditions. Each workflow is initiated by a specific event, and there are 3 events that can start a workflow, either when an item in a list is created, or if the item is updated, or when a user starts the workflow manually. The image to the left shows the list of actions available to a workflow, and it's available from the action button on the ribbon. An action is the most basic unit of a work in a workflow. For example, an action can be sending an email, logging to a history list, creating a task for someone, or performing calculations. On the other hand, conditions are used to direct a workflow in a specific direction specified by a rule. For example, you can create a rule where the workflow sends an email only if an item is created by a specific person. So conditions, they are equivalent to conditional statement in the programming code, like if and else and switch statements. And SharePoint Designer also provides the capability for the packaging part sorting. And there SharePoint 2013 Designer provides the capability to save a workflow as a template. And this is known as packaging the workflow. After the workflow is saved, it can then be imported into other SharePoint Server 2013 environments and used without the need to redevelop the workflow. Although you can do this in many circumstances, not all workflow types can be saved as a template. Via the settings buttons on the ribbon, you can also specify some configuration settings like changing the task lists. You can set the history list, specifying if you have any forms, initiation forms, that you put values before you start the workflow, the task lists. Then you can also specify it there, or you can use your custom list and specify it there. And you can set the start options, whether you want this workflow to be manually started or when the item is created, you want it to start it automatically. Then you can check the appropriate checkbox there on the page. So this was more or less a quick walkthrough of some of the environment in SharePoint Designer. I haven't shown the screen for where you're working on the workflows, so they are more like either you have the standard text-based editor where you have like a top-down adding actions to your screen, or if you have the Visio Professional installed, you can also use the Visual ActiveX control and provide a visual designer-like interface for your workflow designs. So, for many scenarios, SharePoint Designer can do the job, but as what we are going to describe here, there may be cases where the functionality is not appropriate. So in the subsequent slides, I'm going to show and describe some of the less beneficial features of SharePoint Designer. So first of all, SharePoint Designer is not a special tool for workflows only. The SharePoint Designer was designed as a general tool for creating lots of different non-code SharePoint solutions. So different things that you can do with SharePoint Designer is like creating and modifying site assets like photos, videos, and pages. You can create and modify site columns and content types. For most of the part, SharePoint Designer is used for creating and modifying sites and lists. But in 2013, Microsoft took away the design view, which was very popular, and now the only option for editing sites in SharePoint Designer, you have to do it directly in the code. And then you have the possibility to use SharePoint Designer for integrating line of business data through the business connectivity service model, and that's actually one of the main uses of SharePoint Designer today, and that is to integrate it and create the external content types and external lists for displaying and add great kinds of functionality to external data. So, and you have the web publishing and of course the workflow creation, which I have been now described briefly. So one of the limitations, SharePoint Designer is not a 100% clean workflow authoring application. So it's a general use tool, it's an advanced tool for advanced business users, for those who are not like programmers. And so basically there are lots of functionalities stuffed into it, and probably missing some functions if you could have a 100% workflow tool instead. I also mentioned that there is no native built-in visual designer in SharePoint Designer. If you want this, you can install Visual 2013 Professional. That's a license program, and with it there is an ActiveX control that you can add to your SharePoint Designer 2013, and then you have the options to swap between the text-based designer, which is the default, and the visual designer, which gives more like the functionality that you want to use for workflows. The benefit for the visual designer is that it's easier for maybe people that are not like IT professionals. You can introduce business users to take part in the design of the workflows. Whereas the text-based designer, well, it's the default, and many people are using it, but for many business users it's not a good tool because it's not giving you any visual indications that it should do. So I would say the lack of a good visual designer as a default tool is another limitation. Then you have the different methods of extensibility. As you can see, SharePoint Designer does come with an extensive set of actions, but in some cases there may be actions that you need for your custom workloads that are not there, and then usually the only option is to create a custom action in Visual Studio and deploy it to your site and making it available in SharePoint Designer. But this, of course, it requires some specific skills, and you need access to Visual Studio to do so. Another thing is the future of InfoPath, because InfoPath is a very popular tool for creating custom forms with SharePoint Designer and for your workflows, as opposed to the standard ASPX forms that are there by default. One thing is that InfoPath forms, they require the InfoPath services running, and that requires enterprise versions of SharePoint 2013, and that increases the license prices considerably. And as I just mentioned, the InfoPath is, as far as we know, it will be deprecated in future SharePoint versions, and we still don't know yet 100% what will be the replacement for InfoPath. SharePoint Designer also have pretty limited debugging options. So what you can do is to check for validation errors, and if you have any things written badly well formed in any of the SPX files that you are using, then you can use the check for errors button up on the ribbon. And there is no way for you to test the workflow properly, but so you have to actually deploy it to your site before you can run and test it, and then work more on it if you find any errors in the flow. You have some crude debugging the possibilities that you can use to log the history actions and add a string to the history file for every action, and I see many people doing that. So more or less the only way to get some output of the workflow, or the custom output of the workflow. And I have saved probably the most important limitations of SharePoint Designer, and that is SharePoint Designer as a whole is a tool that you can actually crash your whole farm with if it falls into the hands of the wrong people. Because if you have the access, you can do almost anything with the site up to on my site collection, and just some pieces or lines of codes or some errors that you put in there, then your site collection can be down. So for that reasons, many organizations, they more or less put severe restrictions on people who want to use SharePoint Designer, and in the central administration, web applications, there are settings there that you can use to limit the use of SharePoint Designer. So I have gone through the different limitations that from my point of view there might be more. Other people might say these are not limitations, this is by design. So okay, that may be correct. And if you wanted to make some more advanced workflows, of course you have Visual Studio, but that requires some other types of skills, and that they may not be available in your organization. Maybe you need to hire programming resources from a consulting company, and that may cost a lot. So actually there are lots of things that maybe they limit your workflow story when you're using SharePoint Designer. So now what I'm going to do is to introduce an alternative, and that's the Datapolis process system that we see here now, and probably a good alternative for designing workflows, as you can see. And here I listed some of the overview here. So the main module of the Datapolis process system is a workflow designer. So and they have two additional groups of functionalities. The first one is named application. So simply speaking, any workflow can be transformed into an application and reused in other workflows. Let me remove that one. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, so you can also create applications in an external solutions, and we can build workflows using applications more just like Lego bricks. The second group of application or function is called the central administration. So now it's possible for you to manage the entire workflow system from one central place. Let's switch to the next one. So this is the graphic designer for a workflow with a green start circle to the left and the red end circle to the right. So here you click on an icon in the tool tray to the left, and you can drag it onto the design board pretty easily. So creating a state action diagram using the Datapolis process system is a simple matter of drag and drop, and so compared to SharePoint Designer, it's pretty easy. So you can use the state as a virtual pile and the action as the means of moving the item from one pile to another. So this shows the powerful activity designer that you can use to automate the functionality. And you can see if you open up an activity, it's a set of things that an action can do. And so any action can have lots of different kinds of activities, and it's pretty easy for a user to add activities to the actions. One thing you can do with a processing system here is that you can use your workflows as an application, meaning that you can reuse them inside other workflows. So thanks to applications, it will be easier to keep the whole system in order. For example, if you use one procedure in many workflows and the procedures change, you need to modify all the workflows independently. But in Datapolis processing system, it's enough to change one application in one place, and then all workflows will be modified automatically. So a workflow can be made into an application, and an application can run inside the workflow. To sum up, and a workflow can access external data through an application. So depending on where the data is stored, you may create multiple workflows. So one for each data storage location. So with DPS, most of the time, a person will kick off an action, but it's possible to set a timer that will wait for a period of time. Then at the set date and time, or after a set interval, the system will launch the next action. We can set the install confirmation timer to go off at the time of the scheduled install, requiring the install to report what happened. Then after we get the install request workflow finished, we can package it as an application. So you can see the application is represented by a square, by an aqua square. And we can also package the install confirmation as an application represented by an orange square. We will use these application squares later as we embed them in the overall order entry process. So you can see after the applications have been created, they are accessible up there in the upper right as icons that you can use and add to your other workflows. This is what we see here on the next slide. A workflow application can be reused inside other workflows. So this ability with DPS permits the workflow designer to control changes and reuse workflows in multiple locations. And this very much simplifies the workflow management process. After creating the workflow on the orders list, we will can drag and drop the pre-packaged install request workflow that we have created here onto a pre-install confirmation state. And this allows the user to post an install request on the installer's calendar before moving the order to the waiting install date. We can also attach the install confirmation workflow to the post-install confirmation state. You see it to the right. And the install confirmation can then send data outside SharePoint to the billing system, for instance, to initiate an invoice. So you have complete connections to external applications or business units. As I briefly mentioned, defining activities for an action. So in workflow terminology, you can define an activity as a detailed process or event or low-level process that takes place in an action. An action can contain several activities. So to define those new activities, you open this new designer, and the activities, they can do almost anything. They can be placed in containers and they can be executed only under certain conditions, or they can be executed repeatedly. They can even perform specialized procedure that you create. So until now, we've just been talking about the process designer and different system actions. But the most important parts of a process is, of course, the people around it. So the participants or the attendees that work with the data to cause things to happen in the real world. Datapolis process system assumes two roles for every new workflow. The author is the person who initiates the workflow, in our case the person who enters the order, and by default we have an all users role so that all SharePoint users can do all workflow actions unless we choose otherwise. Sometimes only one person manages items in a given state, but usually several individuals work as a team to fulfill the role. For our process here we have a sales team, a customer service team, and an installer team. So we have colored the states to match the team in charge of that state. So the sales team is tan, the customer service team is blue, and the installer is gray. So we made the final confirmation state pink to match the manager. And since they each have separate roles, let's define what action each team can and should perform. So incidentally, this is a slightly different sample workflow. So I've been showing some of the capabilities with activities and the designer. So let's focus a bit on how we can monitor the workflows in the DPS. So with the Datapolis process system, it's possible to see each instance of a running workflow. So on this slide here to the left, you will have, and just to the right, you have 11 instances and 11 items. So 5 of them are in the analyze event state and 5 are in the finish state, and 1 is not showing. So the person here has 9 instances in this new state. We can also look at the history of each instance and determine exactly when the instance started. So what actions were initiated and what activities were performed and when. So that's a huge improvement, like to SharePoint Designer, which only has the history list to use for this purpose. So let's see a list of different processes that can be monitored. You can, for instance, monitor how regular the flow is, how many items, and how long time things will take, which process takes longest time and which takes the shortest time, and how much an item can wait. So these are examples of different kinds of processes that are monitorable. So after shown the monitoring capabilities, let's see how the Datapolis solutions system is managed. So as you can see, it's pretty much built into the central administration application, just like the rest of the services in the SharePoint farm. So more or less you have its own page in the central administration where you can control more or less most capabilities for the DPS. One thing you can see here, you have the possibility to drill down and list workflows on each and every site in your farm. So there on the top you can select the web applications and then specify site collection, and down to the site level there you can see the different workflows that are installed on those sites and which in the state they're in, if they are running or not, and you can also have a link to the right and modify their definitions. Pretty easy, and you get a clear view of what you got. You don't have to open each and every site. You have everything there shown in one page. And also, logging is more or less integrated into the existing the SharePoint logging system. You are using the standard SharePoint logging levels from none to verbose, and you can specify what kind of activities you want to log, what kind of functions you're going to log in. You can specify for the event level, you specify logging to the Windows log, and for trace level you can specify and configure what you want to log up to the UPS trace log. So that has been a pretty overview of what of the Datapolis process system from my point of view. And so let's summarize briefly what we have done in this webinar. So I've been walking through at a high level what we can do with workflows in SharePoint Designer 2013. I've gone through and described some of the limitations that I think might give you opportunities to maybe try something else, and by the end I've gone through some of the screens of the Datapolis processing system from Datapolis, which I find pretty intriguing and promising. So more or less that's what I had to present in this webinar. So I'm now open for any questions, or probably Datapolis will like to show you some demos of the system first. So are you there, Maciej?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Bjoern, for your presentation. And now we have time for some questions. Now I have a few ones already, and I can answer those ones. So the first is, are the workflow elements like activities static on the design canvas, or can they be moved to different positions? Yes, the workflow designer allows absolute flexibility in designing the model of the workflow you wish to deploy. All the elements like start point and end point, all the states and all the activities can be moved easily, maintaining all the connections between them. So the only obstacle from your point of view is that the model may look less clear when you just over-design it, but from the SharePoint point of view, it doesn't matter whether some state is on the left side, some state is on the right side. Now, from the system point of view, it's all the same. And the second question is this solution available under SharePoint 2010? Well, not exactly this solution, but yes, we also have a product for SharePoint 2010. It is the older version of Datapolis process system called Datapolis Workbox 2010, with some fewer functionalities, like for example, less options in the central administration, and the applications and solutions model that Bjoern mentioned briefly is available only in the SharePoint 2013. So the Datapolis Workbox under SharePoint 2010 does not offer that one, but the main feature, which is Workbox Designer, now looks and works more or less the same.